And what do we test students for? So I'm going to speak about this from a lecturer's perspective. And of course, this might differ from course to course, but universally, generally, things are the same. So I'm going to speak about when we set an exam or when we set a test, when we set a project as lecturers, exactly what are we going for? Exactly what is our aiming to achieve, Okay. Welcome back to another episode. It's been a minute, eh? It's been a minute, and it's been hectic. But I hope you guys are good and I hope you guys are doing well. Look, man, it's exam season. It's exam season, the media exams, and I thought it would be great to talk about exams. You know, Probably you're preparing for exams and stuff like that. So I was having a conversation with a student, as always. I'm sure by now you'd realize that actually each time I come with content here, it's actually generated by the students. So the students will ask me questions and stuff like that, and after a while I'll be like, hey, that question is actually worthy to be on YouTube. It's actually good YouTube content. So here we go again. So obviously it's exam time, so a lot of my students have been asking me about exams. Obviously, guys, we want to pass these exams, right? Who don't want to pass the exams? We all want to pass exams, we all want to graduate, etc. So I like those conversations. Any conversation that is more about progress, I'm for it. So yeah, let's get into that. So the question that the student asked me was, what is it that you as lecturers expect from us as students in the exam? It was more like, what is it that you as lecturers you look for when you are actually marking us and when you are sitting for the exam? And I actually thought that is a very nice question. Nobody has ever asked me this question. And I think even myself, I've never really pondered about this question to say, actually, what is it? Because the most important thing that actually took out from that conversation, as in when we were talking about it, and actually the takeaway that actually told the student, or the main theme that I sort of deducted from that was, you need to study the game, man. You need to study the game. And by that I mean this, so in every endeavor that you actually get into, it's very much important for you to be able to study that endeavor. I mean, if you want to be a great soccer player, yes, you can have the talent, but I think what comes with it is also like understanding the game and knowing how to really read and analyze the game. I don't think people like Lionel Messi are just good because they are good, but I think their understanding of the game is actually at a higher level. Well, I'm just making a deduction or an extrapolation from this, which can look like it's going off tangent. But you get what I mean, right? So as a student, you also need to spend enough time really trying to understand the game. By that, I mean that it's not only about studying. Studying alone won't make you successful as a student. It won't make you to pass the exams. Yes, you can pass and stuff like that, but what actually comes mostly is actually understanding the whole game. And by the game, what do we mean by that? And that's why sometimes people talk about this concept of studying smart. Studying smart is actually just the concept of you are studying, but you are also studying with some level of consciousness, some level of understanding. You're a woke student, not a woke as in like politically woke, but you understand actually what is going on. And that's why I think first year in most cases is usually very difficult, because as a student, you're still trying to understand what is going on. You're still trying to understand the structure of this, what is this, and stuff like that. So By the game, we mean that really spend time really trying to understand. For example, a lot of students don't know what. Okay, firstly, they don't know the composition of their exam. And we're gonna get into that, exactly what I mean by that. I don't mean the scope really. Well, the scope is part of the composition. And the other thing that people don't really spend time doing is to also understand what is it that are they getting tested for, right? Because whether you're writing an exam, whether you're writing an assessment, an assignment, you have a project, whatever that is, it's a test. All these things are a test. And as a student, I think you need to understand what is it that I'm actually being tested for, and what do we test the students for? So I'm going to speak about this from a lecturer's perspective. And of course, this might differ from course to course, but universally, generally, things are the same, So I'm going to speak about when we set an exam or when we set a test, when we set a project as lecturers, exactly what are we going for? Exactly what is our aiming to achieve, I know one of you can be like, your achievement, you want to chow us. As students will say, or you want to make us fail, stuff like that. I was having a conversation with one of my, I like this student. He always have these questions which are sort of out of the box questions. So he always asks me these questions like, where will this be applicable in the workplace? Why am I studying this and this and this and this? And we end up having great conversation about those things. Because the whole point of university is just that I think as a student, obviously, it's hard to see this because it's like you're in the pot, you're being cooked, figuratively, of course. But the whole point of university is to create and to train students, number one, to be thinkers. That's the whole point, to be thinkers and to be independent thinkers. And I know we throw this words around sometimes. What is an independent thinker? Oh, I think independently. I am independent, as some people like the concept of independency. But the whole point of university is to, number one, generate knowledge. Number two, to actually train students in that knowledge and to create knowledge out of that, That's why as a student, you usually in your undergrad, we teach you stuff and stuff like that. But the whole point is that you also need to start sort of creating or co-creating that knowledge with us. That is, now you start to think about, what about this? How about I do this way? I know that you've actually taught me this way, but I want to do it this way, etc., etc. And that usually happens a lot in postgrad when you now go and do your honors, your masters and stuff like that. I think one day we need to talk about that. Things like how to choose a topic, how to choose a supervisor. Those things can be heavy sometimes. So that is what a university is meant to do. But in most, the big thing is that universities are trying to create professionals, right? If you're doing an engineering degree, then the aim of that engineering degree is to actually make you an engineer. That is to be, engineers know this. They know how an engineer thinks and how an engineer should think, how an engineer should approach problems, etc., etc. So the whole point of this is to really build you at the end. The building is never good. It's never good. You only appreciate the building after. I was telling my students, these are the second years, I was telling them that they were like, no, we're working under pressure and everything like that. I'm like, that's a skill that you're learning. Working under pressure and being able to sustain that is actually what happens in the real world. Some jobs are actually like that, especially engineering jobs and stuff like that. I'm not picking on professions, but, there are some jobs which actually require people to be able to work under pressure. Like, think about doctors. You can be operating someone for I've heard of some of the doctors that I know telling me that you can be operating someone for 3 hours straight. and you are not supposed to take a break, because you take a break, somebody's life is gone. So if you look at the whole medicine degree and you look at the pressure that they pump on them, it looks crazy as a student. You're like, but what is the whole point of this? But at the end is that, as lecturers, we are aware of what and the type of person and the type of profession that we want you to be, or the type of a degree holder that we want you to be. And every university has its own policies around that, to say, we want our graduates to be innovative, creative. We want them to be like this and this and this. We want them to be change makers, to be impactful individuals, etc., etc. So the way they do it, then they would package it in that fashion. So the process is like that. But I'm getting to this. I'm talking about this because I want to talk about what is it that, when we are setting a test or an exam, what is it that we are expecting, and then what is the objective of us as lecturers, and what is our goal really? Of course, it's not to make you fail. It's really not. It's really not. And talking about failing, one student was like to me, like, yeah, but why can't you make the exam easy? And I gave him the analogy to say, imagine that we do make the exam easy, and what we would be doing we would actually be doing a disservice on you as a student. In fact, we will also be doing a disservice on society. Imagine we have, you go to a doctor, and then for some reason you are having a heart surgery, and for some reason you ask for the marks of that doctor, and you find that the doctor actually got 50 on the dot for heart surgery as a course. Let's say there is a course called heart surgery. Probably there is. And the doctor actually got 50% on the dot for that course. And they're about to operate you. Are you going to just lay there and be like, hey, I trust you, man. You've got this? Nah. You would always want someone who is, in your own eyes and in your own assessment, they're actually good. They're actually excellent at what they do. They're on top of their game. That's what the service that you want. So the aim is not to make you guys fail as students. The aim is to actually create individuals who are actually, they know what they're doing, they understand what they're doing, because trust me, these things will catch up with you. There are students who try to dodge the system. They would maybe, I don't know, copy. Now there is this whole thing of AI, ChatGPT. Students are actually using it a lot to get whatever. Look, it's going to catch up with you. One day you're going to be in industry, or one day you're going to be a professional, and it's really going to catch up with you. Really is going to catch up with you. I think one day let me note this down. I need to do a video about the things or the skills that you need to collect as a student. You need to collect as a student. Sorry about this. Okay. As a student. It's just a thought that actually came into mind. It's going to catch up with you. And you don't need to dodge the system. You really need to understand all of these things. So when we make up a test, or when we make up an assignment or an exam, in fact, the preparation of so the whole thing is really to prepare you for the ultimate exam. By this, I mean this. So there are two types of assessments. We have something that we call formative assessments, and we have some things that we call summative assessments. Formative and summative assessments. So formative assessments are the assessments that we use we give to the students, and the main aim of the formative assessments is to really build up on their knowledge. So those are things like maybe an assignment, those are things like maybe a tutorial test, a quiz. They're usually like smaller, chunk of assessments and stuff like that, or maybe a group project. So those are like those projects. The main aim of those assessments is actually to make the student to actually really build up the knowledge. It's part of the learning system. It's part of the learning process, right? And then thereafter we have the summative assessments. Summative assessments, now that's when you have your tests and you have your exams. Those are actually the assessments at the end of the whole thing. Now we actually test you for the whole chunk of things, but everything has been accumulating over the time period. So, and everything starts from there. In fact, preparing for exams starts from there. You know, if you don't understand your tutorials, if you do not understand your, I don't know, maybe the assessments that you've been given, you've been doing bad at them and stuff like that, that can also mean that you're going to do bad in the exam. In fact, it's one of the things to really check if a student is going to perform very bad. If you look at the data of your previous assessments and you've been doing very bad, chances are you can also do bad in the last assessments, which is the exam or the test and stuff like that. So you need to make it a point that you need to approach each assessment as a learning process. It's part of the learning trajectory. It's part of the learning process. So if you have, a tutorial test or a spot test, or you have an assignment, people overlook these things and just feel like, oh, I'm gonna, and stuff like that. No, please give it equal attention. It is important. It is part of the development of your knowledge, and stuff like that. So we give you those things, the smaller assessments during the year, depending on each course. You'll find each course has a breakdown. They'll tell you that, okay, you're going to have an assignment, it's worth 10% of your year mark. You're going to have this, it's worth this. You're going to have this, it's worth this. You need to know all of these things. It's part of what I call studying the game. Understanding exactly the type of assessments you're going to have in your course and what do they entail and what is actually what are you expected to do in those things. What is the expected performance? What is your expected way of answering, etc., etc. So those are important. Please bear them in mind and do them to your highest ability. There is no assessment which is less important. I know when coming to exams, people focus too much on the exam because usually the exams count a lot of marks. But actually, everything is accumulated from that. So I usually tell my students this, that every small assessment during the year, like is a tutorial quiz, those things you don't waste time. You actually make sure that you actually go for the jugular, go for the kill. You make sure that those ones you actually do the best in them. Like those are smaller assessments. You can see that, no man, I can totalize on this. Why waste time? So when coming to the exam and the test, the most important thing that we want to see from you as a student, and the most important thing that we are testing, is your understanding of the concept, the understanding and the application. And I know it sounds like a cliche because it's like, of course, it has to be that, isn't it? Yeah. But I find that a lot of students, what they try to do, especially first years, they really, and I also blame the system, the public school system, because I don't think the way we've been taught, it changes when it comes to university. When it comes to university, really, we really want you to understand, not to recall, not to remember stuff. And just, I remember this and I can just say it. No, I can cram this and, no. We really want you to understand. So that's what we're testing for, like really understanding. And trust me, we have ways to really can test you and ways to know that you really understand. There is a way in which we can formulate the questions to really see that the student really understand. So that's why sometimes the things of cramming, they can catch up with you very hard. Because we have ways to really see if the student really understands this or not. So that's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is we want to test if you really understand the concept and if you can actually recall the concepts and actually apply them on the right problems. So the whole point of lecturing and lectures, you attend class and the course, is that we're giving you tools. Think about it like that. We're giving you all the tools you need. We teach you this method, we teach you that method, we teach you all these methods. But then, as a student, you need to know, when do I pull out the right tool for a problem? Because all what an exam is just a bunch of problems that we give to you, and you need to solve those problems. So the idea is that, can you identify, number one, comprehend what the problem is? So the first thing that we want you to understand is that you need to be able to understand the questions and be able to deduce the question as they are. What is this question asking me? You know, and that's where a lot of failing starts from there. It starts from somebody is in the exam and they can't understand what the question is requiring of them. We want you to understand that. We want you to be able to decode and analyze a question and break it down. You see, so whatever course that you're doing, that is the important thing. What are ways of analyzing and sort of breaking down questions in your course? Because each course has its own language, each course has its own ways of doing things. So if you get a question, let's say I'm a mathematician, so I'll make an example about mathematics. If the question says differentiate this function, as a question, firstly as a student who's doing maths, you should firstly understand, what is the question asking you? The question is asking me to differentiate. Then the next thing will be like, okay, do I know what is to differentiate? You should know in the exam what is to differentiate. In mathematics, there are many ways and many rules of differentiation. Then the next question would be like, okay, this is a problem about differentiation. I'm supposed to differentiate this function, right? And then, okay, I know I have to differentiate. The question is now, which method of differentiation am I supposed to use? How do I know that? The function must tell me which ways of differentiation I must use. So the most important thing, first and foremost, is to really, in the exam, to be able to understand each question. What is the question saying? What is the question requiring from me? And you should have learned all of that throughout the course of the course. You know, the terminology, the jargon, how to approach questions and stuff like this. These are the things that you should have been asking. So that's the first thing. The second thing now is that we expect you to be able to actually use the right tools to actually now answer the question. You know, to say, oh, this question is about differentiation. I'm differentiating a function like this. This function, the way it is, it will require the chain rule. Okay, let me go and do that. And then you actually do the whole thing. So the second thing is the identification, and then also now identifying the right methods and the right tools for you to actually solve that problem. And that's where now the whole course is centered around. The whole course is centered around, can you be able to actually use these concepts to actually solve problems, or to use these concepts to answer questions relating to these concepts? If you are able to do that, then you're actually very good. And one of the things is this, and now that's where the kicker is, and this is where the core is. Usually when we test students, we actually test them on and for each of you, anyone who's watching this, look at your course, right? And look at the questions that are asked in your course in the exam. Maybe you can look at a past paper and stuff like that. In most cases, we give you problems that these problems are actually staggered, or they're actually very, how do I put this? It's a problem of many layers. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. You hardly find, especially in the exam, a question which is just on one topic. You find a question which actually has many layers of many other concepts, but on one question. I don't know how to give an example about this, But what I mean is, one of the things that we expect from you as a student in the exam is to be able to use these concepts in answering those questions. But quite importantly, it's actually you being able to link these concepts together. And that's how the course, that's the whole course just actually constrict to that. So, for instance, right? If the exam is about, man, I'm trying to find a real life example here. I want to use a mathematics example, but I know that it's not going to be a good example. Well, it will be a good example, but I don't like being about mathematics all the way. I'm trying to find a suitable example for this. So, let's say that I know all of you have TikTok, right? Probably. Or at least you have some, so you have a phone and stuff like that. The way you're so good with your phone is that you can do multiple things on the phone at the same time. That's how good you are. In fact, that's the test to see if someone is good at something, is if they can be able to perform a task, but they can still be able to do a lot of things at the same time. So, for example, if somebody knows how to cook, now they can cook in a way that is so advanced that, they can be able to now, cook pap with, then add rama on pap. You're like, why rama on pap? It's like, yeah, but, I'm really trying to find an example here, but I'm struggling. So by this I mean that when you learn different concepts, all these concepts actually, there's a point where they actually link up together. And your ability to make the link to say, oh, I'm going to use this concept and this concept and this concept on this question. That is actually what differentiates people in the exam. So if you are doing mathematics, for instance, we give you a question that maybe it's a differentiation question, but maybe for you to differentiate, maybe first you have to firstly split this into partial fractions, and then thereafter maybe you have to, use some trigonometry on the question, and thereafter you need to apply, maybe it's a chain rule question, but maybe for you to use the chain rule, within the chain rule there's actually implicit differentiation, those kind of questions which are very staggered, which have a lot of many other, concepts, but all applying to the same question. I think, yeah, that is actually the way in which we expect students to do, and the way we expect them to actually be able to answer the questions and to be able to use the tools concurrently. It's like you're using all these tools and all you have learned and the concepts that you've all learned, but you're using them concurrently at the same time. So that is what we expect from you as that is our expectation for you as a student, especially as far as the test and the exam is concerned. And that's what we objective when we actually test for the exam. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, especially on the issue of studying the game, is you really need to understand the composition, man, of your course, and understand also the composition of the exam of your course. So, for instance, by this I mean, so courses are different, right? But usually in the exam, you'd find that there are some questions that test you on theory, just the theory. Do you understand the theory of the exam? The theory of the course. There are questions which actually test you mainly on the application. It's usually like that in most cases. It's like this two form, the theory and the application. There are questions which are just like on the theory only. Then there are questions which are just on the application only. And then there are questions which actually have a balance of the both. So that's what I mean when I say you need to study your course and study the exams of your course to say how are the exams for this course structured? And by this, I don't mean that you are learning the pattern or you're trying to cram the pattern, because at varsity, patterns changes, But what I mean is to understand the core basics of the exam, to say, it's going to come with the theory and the application. And then what is the theory for this course and what are the applications for this course? But like I say, courses differ in most cases, but those two elements are actually very much important. And the other thing, man, is that, the exam is always balanced. And I always tell my students this, to say, it's easy to pass an exam. Hey, and I know you're coming for me, eh? How how dare can you say that? How dare can you say that? But I mean that once you've studied the game, then it becomes easier to pass an exam. Because in most cases, when coming to the exam, we have two types of questions. We have seen questions and unseen questions. So seen and unseen. Seen as in like you have seen this before, unseen as if you have never seen this before. So usually in most cases you'd find that in a course, some of the questions in the test, the exam or the test, you'd find that, no man, this is a tutorial question. It just comes, as Mahlatsi Mariba would say, that it is that it will come masquerading as a new question. I like that term. It comes masquerading as a new question. Meaning that you have seen this, you have actually done this. You have done this question, but it looks like a different question, but actually you know the question. We have just tweaked it. In fact, so those are the questions that we sometimes take from the tutorials, from the lecture notes, or from the textbook and stuff like that. But this is something that you have seen. Because, guys, we're not bad people as lecturers. We also want students to pass. So that's why we have those questions. I call them seen questions, which are questions that we have seen. So that's why sometimes if you do your tutorials, if you do your class examples and you understand them and stuff like that, a good 20% you can be good in the exam. Because maybe just you doing that and understanding that, you can actually find familiar questions that can actually make you to pass. Of course, the level of hardness might be different and stuff like that. And look, and I'm spilling the beans here, and probably it's not good. Some lecturers are actually very lazy. They actually just go and take questions from the textbook and they change them, or they take a certain you get what I'm saying? So sometimes it helps to just do well in your in your test. Not in your test, but in your tutorials and stuff like that, because that actually increases the chances of you actually doing well. Plus, it's also part of the whole point of preparing yourself for the exam. And then you have unseen questions. So unseen questions are questions that, now these are questions that they are different or they look different, but you can still do them, learning what you have learned in the course. You can still do them, but those are questions that are now supposed to stretch your mind. These are questions which are a bit more, you have to do a bit of more thinking, etc., etc. So if you balance those things out, and for the unseen question, you just need to know your stuff. You need to know your work thoroughly. Then you can actually be able to do well in the exam. So that is the expectation that we expect as lecturers. The other thing is that we expect you to answer all questions. I know this sounds like, no, but we can't. But we expect you to answer all questions. So usually the advice that I usually have for my students is that never leave a question blank. Try to, write up something, even if it doesn't, well, not that you should just write things that don't make sense and stuff like that, no. But maybe you can get, because the way we mark students is that especially in the exam or the test, is that we don't mark the final question. We do mark it, but it's not like if the question is 5 marks, it's not like 5 marks is for the final solution. No, you do get part marks. So the other thing is this: write your solutions in full. I know some students who are very smart, they try to, because they're super smart, they can actually just write only one step and then they make a lot of calculations in their head. I'm talking about mathematics here. And then jiggy jiggy, they write the final answer. And the final answer is right, but they haven't shown any workings. We don't know if you've guessed this. So that's why it's important for you to actually just write your answers in full. Try to be as detailed as possible, The other thing is that students really like the level of writing, man, is poor for some students. And that's what makes students to fail. They know what they're doing. They know what they're supposed to do, but the way they write things and the way they put in their ideas, it just leaves you like confused, even as a marker. So you need to learn, quite importantly, how are things supposed to be in your course in terms of answering. Like if you're doing maths, how am I supposed to actually formulate my answers? For example, things like induction. For those of you who have done mathematical induction, it becomes very wordy. It becomes like an essay of some sort. There is a way in which we want you to actually put those things right. So spend time really, and that's why going to lectures is important, and that's why consulting is important. And I know that some students will say, like, I don't want to go to lectures, but the other reason of going to lectures is to just see how the lecturer do the examples and how they formulate the examples and how he formulates or she formulates the solutions. Because that is what you should also do, to formulate the solution. So, hey man, when you mark, marking is depressing. Well, at least for me sometimes, because, so please write your solutions in the required way. For whatever course that you're doing, write your solutions in the required way. And this is where you should have done the work. So usually, I do have students who, in my class, I advise them, especially those who consult a lot, I advise them to say, maybe towards the exam, do a past paper, right? Or maybe not even the past paper, but when you do your tutorials, etc., or maybe when you do your class notes, but usually it's with the exam. I usually advise my students to say, look, do a past paper, write it down and write the solutions, and actually go to your lecturer and just go through all the solutions, if possible, just to see did you do everything right? I have students who just come and just be like, hey, I was doing this question and I've done it. I think I'm right, but can you just look at my steps and see if I didn't make any mistake, etc., etc. I know that maybe not all lecturers have time for that, but I do it sometimes with students, and we just go through the solutions and be like, no, be careful of this. Make sure that you put your questions like this. Make sure that you show all the this, and stuff like that. So, for example, I had a student who was showing me her workings, and usually when she differentiate, sometimes she integrate. It's a funny thing, and I understand why. So notation sometimes is important, and so that's why I'm saying that we expect you to really write in a neat way, and we expect your work to flow. We expect you to actually write in detailed fashion. We expect you to write the solutions in full and using the correct language and the correct terminology and the correct notation. That's what we really expect from you, And, man, I think those are the expectations that we have. And we also expect you to pass. I know it sounds like a fallacy, but we do expect you to pass the course. So I'll leave it here for now. And yeah,